All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first of our Allocating Water for Natural Areas webinar series. Today we are with Hyun, the Director of Water and Coastal Policy for the National Audubon Society. She's going to be diving a little bit into the federal budget and some of Audubon's recommendations for a healthy Colorado River. So without anything further, I'll pass it on to Karen.
Thanks, Steve. Hi, everybody. This is Karen. Thank you for joining me and spending some time out of your day to listen about our federal budget priorities for the Colorado River. I started with Audubon about 3.5 months ago in DC, based out of DC, but had some jobs in the previous administration in various positions, and then worked on Capitol Hill in the Natural Resources Committee. And the most interesting part about my background, I just want to mention, is that I actually did my dissertation research in the Colorado River Delta. So lived with a host family in the Rio Hardy, which is the last tributary in the Colorado River, and ran a native plants nursery and did some habitat restoration down there and some bird surveys and well monitoring to try to create a constituency and to increase the habitat restoration for wildlife down there. So glad to be back in the mix here and part of the Audubon family. So next slide. I'm just going to dive right in here on the Colorado River Basin and the importance. I think all of you know, as you sit in the middle of it, the basin itself is 7 states large. It's a river that provides drinking water for 36 million people. Is very important in terms of maintaining the flexibility of that water and preventing shortages, particularly in the times of drought, to help wildlife and habitat and birds that we care about. The reservoirs in the Colorado River Basin were, as most of you know, filled to the brim at the end of the 20th century, but last year we're at historic lows following a 16-year drought and growing human demands. And while it's been a really wet year in the West, this year, one wet year doesn't necessarily alter or solve the fundamental problems of the demand of water in the basin, which is demand is exceeding supply. And the fluctuations in the weather do not substitute for putting systems in place that encourage conservation and flexible water management, which is a lot of the work that we all are and the DC team is doing on the policy side. And as you all know, the diminished stream flows pose serious challenges for cities and farms and wildlife and birds and recreation, since 70% of all the wildlife in the West relies on the rivers for some part of their life cycle. Some of the models project, including from the Bureau of Reclamation, that by 2060, the demand for water for the Colorado River is going to exceed supply by 3.2 million acre feet, which is 20% of today's average supply. So those projections, I think, point that we actually need more conservation in the system as demands grow. And coming up short could put at risk all of these great values that we have for the river, both for communities and drinking water, agriculture production, recreation, and the economies that are supported by those environmental benefits. So I'm going to switch a little bit into the federal programs and funding that we've been looking at. The federal government has a unique and significant role in supporting the sustainability of the Colorado River. The programs that I'm about to talk about support projects that offer multi-sector benefits wherever possible to protect the flow of the river, ensure greater economic vitality, and secure water resources for millions of Americans dependent on this critical natural resource. The programs that we're focused on are run by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, which sits in the Department of the Interior, and the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which sits in the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And the programs I'm about to talk about support these goals of increased water conservation and efficiency in the West. These programs are based on voluntary market-based incentives and will help to avoid involuntary, uncompensated shortages to water in the future. We, Audubon, are working in coalition with a number of conservation NGOs and a coalition of agriculture partners that include folks like the Family Farm Alliance and Imperial Irrigation District and Western Growers and many others. I think as many of you are probably reading in the papers, the federal budget climate is very challenging right now and very difficult to advocate for programs such as these. But we believe that there's an increased chance of success in making sure that this money flows to the ground here for water conservation and efficiency and to increase habitat conservation by working in coalition with these partners. So I was just going to start a little bit by talking about the Federal Budget 101, since it's probably like a foreign language to most people. So this slide just goes over sort of what the normal budget process would be if things were normal, which they are not, which I'll go into in the next slide. But so in a normal federal budget year, the fiscal year for the federal government starts on October 1st, and it runs through September 30th of the following year. In a regular appropriations process, the president would release a proposed budget on the first Monday in February. The Congress would then, by April 15th, consider a budget resolution that would set the spending ceilings for all the different departments and agencies in the federal government, and then the process would continue through the spring and summer, where the appropriations committees and then the Congress as a whole, both the House and the Senate, would consider these appropriations bills and pass something by September 30th. In the case where they are unable to pass, come to agreement on what the individual levels of programs should be, they would pass what's called a continuing resolution. So if regular bills are not enacted, basically by the start of the next fiscal year, then they would adopt the continuing resolutions, which would maintain the previous year's levels of funding until they come to agreement on the regular bills. So as I said before, we're not actually operating under those normal procedures. So I was going to give you a little update of what's happening in 2017 and 2018. So the federal government is currently operating under a continuing resolution until April 28th, which is coming up here soon. And it's operating at FY16 funding levels, which were levels that were proposed in the President Obama's administration and approved by that Congress. So negotiations currently are still ongoing on FY17. We expect that they will propose a one-week short-term continuing resolution to finish up these negotiations, so they might flow into May. The biggest issues on the plate are the defense supplemental, which is at $30 billion, the border wall request, which is at $3 billion, and a handful of policy riders, which are basically policy decisions that are put on an appropriations bill that certain members request. And a lot of them happen to be environmental riders, unfortunately. But I think we expect that they will eventually come to some sort of agreement, likely to pass either a continuing resolution for the rest of 2017 or some combination of a continuing resolution for some of the ones they can't come to agreement on, and an omnibus for the other appropriations bills, and get us through the end of the year, or the end of the fiscal year. In the meantime, they will start, as soon as they finish on 2017, they'll start on 2018. You may have heard that the president released what's called a skinny budget, which sort of outlines his top priorities for 2018. That was released on March 16th of this year. In the departments, most departments were slashed across the board to meet a $54 billion defense increase. So most of the non-defense programs were hit across the board. The ones we care about, which include the Department of the Interior, was proposed for a decrease of 12%, and USDA was proposed for a decrease of 21%. So those are pretty big cuts to FY16 levels. However, we don't really know what the detail of that budget is, which will be released in mid-May. We're hearing around May 16th. Anyway, that's driving basically a very truncated appropriations process to be able to resolve all those issues by September 30th so that we can have a budget for FY18 in place by October 1st at the end of the year, this year. So that was sort of the Budget 101. I was going to just go into the sets of programs, both within reclamation and the Natural Resource Conservation Service, that we are working on making sure that they have robust funding so that we can increase water conservation on the ground here and protect water for habitat and for birds. So the first is WaterSmart. WaterSmart is a program that's been a powerful tool for conserving water through mainly collaborative local projects. There have been 243 grants issued between 2010 and 2015 that saved an estimated 557,000 acre-feet of water per year, which could provide water for more than 2.2 million people. So it's a very significant collaborative grant program. Yet only about 1 out of 5 grant applications receive funding, which reflects a huge amount of unmet water savings potential if there was more money that was put to the ground here. Less than 10% fund projects that have benefit for both water users and watersheds on which they depend, and we believe the program could do much more to improve river habitat and watershed health by prioritizing those through water conservation projects, and we're working on making sure that that policy priority is pushed through this grant program. We are recommending that the Congress appropriate in FY18 $30 million for WaterSmart grants, which would allow the Bureau of Reclamation to at least fund 1 out of every 3 grant proposals. The second program is the System Conservation Pilot Program, which is a really critical tool for protecting water storage levels in Lake Mead and Lake Powell. This is sort of a novel approach that's really increased the collaboration among water users in the West, in the Colorado River Basin. So the SCPP pilots have shown that basically temporary, voluntary, and compensated reductions in water use can benefit water users, in-stream habitat, and reservoir storage. In FY16, the System Conservation Program received $5 million, and our coalition worked to basically be able to increase the authorization level to $50 million in one of the bills that passed Congress last year, so that we can continue and increase these innovative projects in the upper and lower basin. So we're advocating for an increase from the $5 million that were appropriated somewhere above the $20 million to $50 million line. The next program is the Colorado River Basin Salinity Control Program, which enhances and protects the quality of water available to users above Imperial Dam. This is a basin-wide federal state salinity control forum that's recommended increased appropriations, which are matched by hydropower revenues from federal dams in both the upper and lower basins, and augmented by funding in one of the USDA programs in the upper basin. This program helps through modernizing irrigation systems and by pairing reductions in water consumption for system conservation. It's estimated that municipal and agricultural water users along the Colorado River would incur almost $400 million more in economic damages per year. The next program is the Lower Colorado River Multi-Species Conservation Program, which was requested at $16.8 million in FY17. These are important programs to provide long-term Endangered Species Act compliance for both current and future water delivery and diversion and power production, and quality habitat to conserve populations of 26 species, including federally endangered species. And similar to that, in the upper basin, we have the Upper Colorado and San Juan Rivers Endangered Species Recovery Implementation Programs. These are funded by both the Bureau of Reclamation and the Fish and Wildlife Service, and they support 2 critical partnerships that work to recover endangered fish in the Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming, and provide Endangered Species Act compliance for more than 2,300 water projects in the Upper Colorado River Basin. Now, switching over to the Department of Agriculture, there's a handful of projects, programs that we are supporting. Just for context, in 2014, the Congress passed the last Farm Bill, which reduced mandatory spending by about $6 billion. So those cuts were cut across a lot of these conservation programs, and so our coalition is pushing that no further cuts in FY18 happen to these programs. These programs include, the first is the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, which promotes innovative conservation practices that improve the health of landscapes and rivers through partnerships driven that address multiple natural resources concerns on a sort of a landscape scale. Through our work, through our coalition, the Colorado River Basin had been designated one of 8 critical conservation areas, that gives some money through this program to the Colorado River Basin. Across the country, the program has supported nearly 200 projects in all 50 states from about 590 million investments. More than 2,000 conservation partners contributed an additional 900 million in financial and technical assistance, indicating this program's ability to significantly leverage non-federal funding. So it's a great partnership program, and I think it's sort of the wave of the future of how USDA is going to do business. The next set of programs are basically help with irrigation efficiency and conservation. They include the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, which promotes the voluntary application of land use practices that maintain or improve the condition of natural resources, including wetlands and wildlife habitat. The Conservation Stewardship Program, which encourages producers to maintain existing conservation activities and to adopt additional practices, including efforts to improve water usage through irrigation efficiency or select crops based on available moisture. And the last is ASAP, which is the Agricultural Conservation Enhancement Program, which is basically a consolidated of 3 conservation programs in the last Farm Bill, which provides agricultural easements as well as wetland reserve easements to protect and restore wetlands. The last program is one that we're actually asking for a big increase in, which is the Watershed and Flood Prevention Operations Program at $200 million. Under the Watershed Program, the NRCS works with local sponsors to facilitate the construction of small watershed improvements, including agricultural water management and fish and wildlife habitat enhancements, stream channel restoration, water conservation and quality, forest health, and much more. And these are locally driven, cost-shared projects that address community needs with multiple benefits. Since its inception, it's invested over $6 billion for more than 2,000 projects nationwide and conserved 1.8 million acre-feet of water, protected and enhanced over 47,000 miles of stream corridors, 2.5 million acres of lakes and reservoirs, and 280,000 acres of wetlands. USDA estimates that annually there are $1.4 billion of authorized unfunded projects. So this is a place where we can really make a bang for a buck. Here, I think one of the things to note about this is that by thinking about things on a watershed level scale or a landscape level scale, we really get the environmental benefits we need with the partners we need on the ground, including the agricultural industry. So as you all know, because you're here, Audubon has a multi-state grassroots effort to protect and enhance rivers and wetland riparian habitat through WRAN, or Western Rivers Action Network, which is focused on the Colorado River and its tributaries. And our network is strong, about 35,000 members, including 8,000 in Arizona. It provides an opportunity for conservation action with non-traditional partners, including the hunting and fishing constituencies. And it's nonpartisan, so it's based on the sound science that it's very important. So I'm here today just to give you that primer about the budget and where we think there are important federal programs to be advocating for, and really appreciate that you've taken the time to spend some time with us to discuss this. Here's a list of things that you can do to help. As I mentioned before, the budget climate is really tough, and I think what it's going to take in this process of getting a budget across the finish line for FY18 that has our priorities in there is a lot of advocacy from all of you. So things that you can do to help include joining the network so that you can keep abreast of what's going on. So here are some links to sign up for future webinars, to take action on current issues, and to sign our petition for healthier rivers. It's also really important for you to stay in touch with your members of Congress and state staff. So contacting them about what's important on these conservation programs that are highlighted today is really critical. And making that personal is really important. So linking that to the ecosystem benefits you see from having water in the system to birds is really going to make a difference. And then staying in touch with the members themselves, so scheduling in-district meetings or attending town halls, it's going to be really critical. And last of all, communicating to local papers about the importance of this funding is going to be really important. So I appreciate anything you can do there.
All right, thank you, Karen. The budget can be, especially the federal budget, can be kind of a hard thing to translate. So we really appreciate having you here sharing your expertise. I want to open it up now to questions. I still have all of your phone lines muted, so if you could drop your questions in the chat box down below, I'll go ahead and read those out and we'll get answers. After that, if you're uncomfortable putting your questions in the chat box that way, I will open the phone lines for just a second and let you do it that way. So it looks like we've got our first question in here from Jim Russ. And he asks, which of the NRCS programs would be available to fund or cost share land or water acquisitions for riparian habitat for birds, aquatic life, etc.?
Good question. So the main program that does that is ASEP, the Agricultural Conservation Enhancement Program, which is money that goes straight to agricultural land easements to protect wetlands and bird habitat.
All right. Thank you, Karen. Anyone else? Maybe not. So I'll open up the phone lines. It might get crazy for a second, depending on what's going on the other end of these lines, but we'll give it a try. Any questions on the phone?
So sorry.
Just some noisy feedback. So I think that is it for us today. Thank you for joining us. As Karen mentioned, we have additional webinars coming up over the next couple of weeks. So definitely hop onto the Arizona WRAN website and check out our events page to sign up for those. And thank you again. Have a good rest of your afternoon.